Hi, I'm William Peters, and I want to share with you how I got into my work. And I study and work with people clinically around these profound end of life experiences. People describe them as mystical, transcendental, life transforming. I didn't grow up thinking I would be a psychotherapist who would help people understand these experiences. But I had my own experiences early in my life. My first one was a near-death experience at 17 years old. I had a high-speed skiing accident, was catapulted out of my body, and I saw myself moving away from my body, the ski area, planet Earth. This was a pretty classic near-death experience. And I saw my life reviewed in front of me. Then I ran into that uh, beautiful luminous light, which I referred to as God, and pled to come back to live my life. I felt like I had a calling or something I had not finished. Of course, I was only 17 years old. But when I came back, I didn't think about that experience for a long time. But I had other similar experiences, one in particular. But also, I started working with people at end of life and who were dying. And one afternoon, when I was working at Zen Hospice Project in San Francisco, actually, I was reading a man who was I was reading to a man who was very close to death. And I popped out of my body. I mean, I literally just don't even think I stopped reading. And there I was, suspended above my body and Ron's body. And he was acknowledging that I was there. And he was saying to me, telepathically, check this out. This is where I've been. And he had a big smile on his face. All I could see was his face. I still have the image in my mind. Well, I found this experience to be one similar to the near-death experience I'd had, in the sense that I was out of my body, but still had a sense of myself, and other experience I had as well. So I gradually moved in to study this field. I met Dr. Raymond Moody, 2009, and he wrote a book about the shared death experience in his book, Glimpses of Eternity. And I met Raymond, and he described this shared death experience. And it's like this: somebody dies, and a loved one, caregiver, or bystander reports that they shared in the transition with the dying into a beautiful, benevolent afterlife. Well, when I heard this definition, I said, oh my gosh, I've had these experiences as a hospice worker. It was very similar to my own personal near-death experiences. And so I began to study them. And as it turns out, there are a lot more people having this experience than our culture knows or recognizes. When I started doing the research as a psychotherapist, we're already working with people at end of life and working with grief and bereavement. When I started giving lectures on this, around the country, people came out of the woodworks in droves to share their experiences with me. And they'd often say, yeah, I had this experience when my person was dying. I felt like I went into the afterlife with them. It was beautiful. There were heavenly realms. I saw my grandmother there. She's deceased, but she met my mother as my mother was just dying. I also saw these beautiful beings of light, almost angelic, who seemed to be guiding the process. So I started to see a whole cast of characters and experiences that was, after a few hundred of these cases, a very clear pattern had emerged for me. And I created the first typologies on the shared death experience. And I do go over those in my book. But what I want people to realize is how healing these experiences are. We look at death and dying as a real negative in our life. Like, it's, oh gosh, I know it's going to happen, but I don't want to think about it. And as a result of that, we often find ourselves surprised by death and unprepared. And part of my work is to help people realize that, well, yeah, death is hard when you lose a loved one, but there's these other experiences that provide a context which gives us understanding and imbues death and dying with meaning. So you certainly will lose your loved ones. We all lose the people we love, or we die to them first. But if you realize these experiences are possible and you have them, it changes everything. You realize that your loved one is alive and well in a benevolent afterlife. You realize that you'll see them again. And you realize also that death is not to be feared. In the research I've conducted now over the last decade, that may be the number one finding, is that if you have a shared death experience, your fear or anxiety around death is virtually eliminated. You also come back with this experience, from this experience, with a renewed sense of purpose and meaning in your life. And people say, oh my gosh, as a result of that experience, I realize what my life's about now. And finally, perhaps the most, not the most important thing, but as a grief and bereavement therapist, I found that my clients who had the shared death experience were able to process the loss with more ease. You losing a loved one is always uncomfortable, and in some cases downright painful. But when you have these experiences, it leavens the loss. It's held in a greater context.